In a corner of the Baytown refinery, there is a solitary reminder of the provenance of the land from which Baytown itself grew. William C. Arthur bought this tiny plot from the Scott family, one of Stephen F. Austin's old 300. And you know what? It's still maintained by employees at the facility to this very day. Shortly before the death of Josephine Arthur, oil was discovered at Goose Creek, and a far-sighted oil man, Ross S. Sterling, led other independents to form Humble Oil with a vision of building a refinery nearby. Sarah Bailey's grandfather was one of the first people to set foot on the land near the graveyard to survey the location.
He came to Texas with a brief course on how to survey, all the survey equipment, in a big Gladstone bag, and they brought him across the bay in a skiff, deposited him here out in the mud where the tents were.
Since those days, someone in every generation of Sarah's family has worked at the refinery.
So for me and my family, Capetillo family, we go back about 3 generations. Originally, my great-grandfather, Albert Pantoja, he was here in the early 1920s, where he built many of the houses that you may see in our community.
Refinery employees bought them. It made a whole new other community, you know, because they bought them and built their homes there.
The refinery was an instant success, making a profit in 1923, just 2 years after becoming operational. Even then, technology was central to the company philosophy, with the establishment of a development department. And would you believe this building was home to a partnership with MIT? But not all the solutions were high-tech.
They had 400 World War I Army surplus mules and 60 horses. The supervisors rode the horses and the mules did all the work. The stables were back here. The mules were so smart that they knew every whistle that blew in that refinery. If it was the 4 o'clock whistle, you better get the heck out of their way because they were headed for the corral and the feed bag, you know.
But in the 20s, the economic clouds were gathering, and Sarah Bailey's father-in-law was caught up in the storm.
He was an East Texas tomato farmer and cotton farmer and came down here during the Depression. He came to Baytown, hitched a ride on a railroad car. He stood outside of the gates. That's where you had to start if you were going to work for Humble.
My grandfather was Jack King, and he actually started at the refinery in 1933, I believe. He had polio. They said he would never walk again at one point. I think the company was very good to him and my grandmother because they obviously worked with him to keep him employed.
During the Great Depression, the refinery managed to maintain full employment, and they would need every man and woman in the coming years. Just 6 weeks before the events at Pearl Harbor, toluene production started at the new Baytown Ordnance Works, or BOW, and the chemical facility was born.
My pop, he took a unit that was supposed to make 4,000 barrels a day, and it made 10,000 barrels a day. He had 365 people working for him around the clock to produce that toluene.
70% of America's TNT contained toluene from Baytown.
Oil, the lifeblood of mechanized warfare. The wells and refineries of Texas, Oklahoma, and California account for 60% of the world's supply of crude oil and an even greater percentage of high-test aviation gasoline.
The advent of war forced the pace of technological development.
The synthetic rubber was invented practically out here, you know, and they had to do it because the Japanese had captured all of the islands in Southeast Asia where the natural rubber tree plantations were. Because everything needs a rubber gasket. You got to have tires. You got to have airplane tires.
Not only is the manufacture of this man-made rubber one of the amazing scientific triumphs of our time, the synthetic product is superior to anything heretofore achieved.
You know, Our refinery won the war.
At this time, the communities that popped up around the refinery were still the distinct areas of Pelly, East Baytown, and Goose Creek.
It was a very contentious process when Baytown actually emerged as the name of the community. Exxon being the cornerstone and really a genesis for our community and certainly our city. It predates our city itself now that we are celebrating its 100-year anniversary.
The company day in May 1955 was attended by 20,000 people.
Folks would bring their families. There was activities, there was games, there was food, there was music, and so you don't see a lot of that in corporations anymore.
At the end of the 50s, the company became Standard Oil, already the largest shareholder, but the brand names of Humble Oil and NJ Chemicals would remain for another decade.
Everything is go. The takeoff of the Atlas, blasted aloft by 360,000 pounds of thrust, carries the Mercury.
In keeping with the technological optimism of the time, Baytown started developing rocket fuels for the space program. And land donated in Houston to the Rice Institute was subsequently utilized in the race for space. The 50s and 60s saw accelerated change in process technologies. Now under the unifying banner of Exxon, the 1977 startup of the Baytown Fuels Expansion Project was one of the most complex upgrades in the plant history. About 1,500 work years of technical efforts were devoted through 3 years of planning, making Baytown the largest refinery in the States. In the early 80s, another massive project called the Baytown Refinery Upgrade Project, or BRUP, was approved to convert residuum oil to lighter, cleaner products. In a decade of collapsing energy markets, this project helped the complex survive and thrive. But technology is only as good as the people you have to run it.
I actually went to Lee College after I graduated high school at Robert E. Lee here in Baytown. I hired on with ExxonMobil as a process technician March 25th, 1985. Exxon has always donated a lot to the local school district. I know the city of Baytown and the folks in Baytown have always appreciated it. I think we've set the next generation up well to experience success at the plant. The systems that we have in place, the expansions that are taking place around the site, I think are going to bode well for the future.
The last decades of the 20th century also saw the biggest merger in corporate history. The city of Baytown moved from adolescence to adulthood, and a new generation joined the family.
Graduated from the University of Texas in 2012. Exxon's always been a stable place of employment for my family. We've had a long lineage of people work here. Well, I think at the Baytown complex especially, there's a family-type atmosphere. That's what I really enjoy about working here and why I intend to work here for as long as they'll have me.
I'm proud of all the men and women in the family who have worked out there, and I'm proud of this booger because he's working out there.
Although times have changed, the Baytown complex and its people have retained a special relationship with the city.
Just want to thank you guys for being here this morning for the 2019 Mayor and ExxonMobil Summer Youth Work Program.
Over the past few decades, even the relationship with ExxonMobil and the city of Baytown has evolved. This morning, handing out the awards to the various students, very proud.
And as I look out here at all you students, I see the future. And I see why we're invested in Baytown.
For the city of Baytown, we're certainly proud of ExxonMobil, everything they've always done over the past 100 years for our community.
I think the future is extremely bright for the complex because of the expansion that's going on, because of the people that work for ExxonMobil, and all of that is going to benefit the city.
I think there's a lot of exciting things to come, not only with some of the expansions that have been announced, developments in technology and automation. I think that's all right there on the horizon.
Hey, if it weren't for that refinery, Baytown wouldn't be here.